Liberal conservative versus conservative liberal. Do these concepts commute? Welcome to the Bottom Turtle Podcast.
Hey everybody, theoretical physicist Dr. Shannon Ray here, and I'm trying to make a practice of when I find myself randomly talking to myself and going through an idea in my head to just record it and upload it as an episode. And so I just saw a video. Let me see if I can still find it. I probably can't find it. Anyway, I can't find it. It was a short or a reel on Facebook that I saw, and it was something like what men should know about women by the age of 30, by the time they're 30. And the list itself made me think of the central theme of this rant I'm about to go on. It's not a rant, it's more of a ramble. And it was saying things like, it's something like, don't think that women, and this was posted by a woman, by the way, this wasn't posted by a man. It's like, don't think that women women are more emotional oriented, and don't think they want some sort of logical argument. What they want is to know that that you're there for them emotionally or something like that. Like, show them that you care about their emotions, their feelings. And I don't know, there were several more, but this seems to be pretty consistent as a difference between men and women. And I'm pretty certain that as I've been married, I've been with my wife for, 13 years now. And we've been married for 7 years. And being with the same person for this long, there's definitely as a man, you start to understand, okay, women and men are different. And you talk to other married men, you talk to other men in relationships, and you see very similar patterns. And this difference in men and women in what we prioritize and how we think is, I think at this point, absolutely clear. And I honestly think that one thing about the whole list I saw from this thing on Facebook and this reel is that it's actually a detriment to your mental health and well-being if you don't understand the difference between men and women. Like, thinking that men and women think the same and prioritize the same things will drive you insane. And a lot of times it really does come down to, as a man, it does feel as though you're trying to predict what your woman wants. It's not direct. And this is something I've been saying for several episodes now on all those episodes I did on masculinity and femininity, is that it is not obvious and it's not direct as to what they want. And if you try to approach it with a logical argument and you think that I can just give some structure that will solve this argument or this discussion we're having, that is just not the path for it's not the path forward, really. And so the point that I'm trying to make in all of this, with the observation I've made, that has to do with this idea of commutation. So in physics, commutation is one of the most important concepts. I cannot overemphasize or overstate how important the concept of commutation is. It's literally the foundation of the argument for Einstein's argument for why quantum entanglement makes no sense. I remember when I was in grad school, I actually had the equation for commutators. So the commutation equation, whether or not two things commutate, would be something like you have an operator A and an operator B, and you put them in brackets, and then you say that you set that it doesn't equal zero. So that means that the operators A and B don't commute. And I remember in grad school, I had a couple of undergrads in the lab I was teaching, and I wrote that equation on the board, and I said, this is one of the most beautiful, most profound equations in all of physics. A and B don't commute. And in quantum mechanics, this has to do with simultaneous realities. This is literally the foundation of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, is that if A and B don't commute, then you can actually compute the commutator. So if A and B don't commute, then that means the commutator is not equal to zero. So it's equal to some number. And that number is the basis on which you compute the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is to say it's a degree to which information about A and B can't be known simultaneously. So operators A and B can be something like position and momentum, right? Position, if you know more about the position, you know less about momentum. If you absolutely know momentum, then you know nothing about position. And so, and also commutators are the foundation of the concept of curvature. So it's the way that we compute curvature in differential geometry. It's the basis of these things called holonomies. It is one of the most profound, most important concepts that you can ever come across in physics, is the idea of whether or not things commute. And so this whole discussion about men and women, I think, is a matter of commutation. So let me just explain the basis of the idea of commutation. The basis of the idea of commutation is the idea that imagine you have 2 points. So imagine there's a blank space and there's 2 points, and say they're like diagonally across from each other. So starting from the bottom point, I can take 2 different paths of equal length to the upper point. And so I can go up first, and imagine that this point is up and to the right. So you have 2 points. 1 point is at the bottom. The 1 point is lower. 1 point is diagonally up and to the right. And so I can go up first and then move right, or I can move right first and then I can move up. And in both of those paths, I end up at the upper right point. Now, the point about commutation is that you would think that it doesn't matter which path you take. If I go up first and then right, that should be identical to going right first and then up. But that's precisely what commutation is. Commutation, it says, no, the path you take actually matters. And you can distinguish which path you took based off the number, based off the value of the commutator. So the commutator is actually information that distinguishes one path from the other. But if they do commute, then that means that you can't distinguish which path you took, which means that both paths are symmetric. There's a symmetry there. So again, going back to symmetry, the idea of commutation all has to do with the idea of symmetry, whether or not you can notice a difference between which 2 paths you took. And so why this is really important is because you have to look at something like the statements, I am a liberal conservative versus the statement, I am a conservative liberal. Like, these 2 things sound like they should be the same, but these are actually 2 different paths to what seem like the same point. But they don't actually commute as concepts, like on a symbolic manifold, on a symbolic structure. These things don't commute. And it's something like what you're doing is there's something like an arbitrary privileging. So if you are a liberal conservative, then you're saying something like, I am a conservative first who happens to be liberal. Which is to say something like, my main focus at first, my main priority or principle is to conserve. It is to focus my attention on what should be conserved and conserving it. But I may do it in a liberal way in the sense that it's like, how do I approach my conservatism? Do I just like say, no, you can't have a rule and then just like strike it down? And then when anyone comes to discuss it with me, I'm like, nope, conserve. No, I don't care what you say, conserve. Or are you more liberal in that someone comes up to you and they say, hey, maybe we should adjust this or consider this thing you're conserving, and you ask why, and you open yourself up and you're open to other people's ideas, and so there's this way in which you can be a conservative in which you're more liberal than someone else who is far more conservative, like they're just primary conservative. So you can be like a liberal conservative, or you can be a conservative liberal, where in this case, your main focus is liberation. It's more in breaking down rules. But you may ask yourself, what is the consequence of breaking down this rule? What does the conservation of this rule provide? And what are the consequences so that when I go about breaking rules, I do it in a way that honors something that should be conserved. But your main focus is breaking down rules. And so these 2 things don't commute. These are not the same person. There's a noticeable difference in the way these 2 people think. And I think that this is ultimately the difference between men and women. It's something like men are more like emotional objectivists, or I don't what's the I use it's the idea. Let's do subjective and objective. emotion versus like logic, and or you can just say heart versus mind. I think that's one of the more obvious ones that people can understand, like you thinking with your heart versus thinking with your mind. And so you can think of someone as being like, I am a subjective objectivist, where subjectivity is more associated with the heart, objectivity is more associated with the mind. So I am a subjective objectivist, or I am an objective subjectivist. And I think that this is the difference between men and women. It's what is prioritized, and it's important because it's saying something like both of these things exist within both people clearly, and the difference between them is actually extremely nuanced. That's the point of this. The way I'm articulating it is to actually demonstrate how extremely nuanced this actually is. But I think that what it is something like maturity, and so this difference in orientation and like what is arbitrarily privileged, which path you take first, like where you go first on your path. This difference, I think, is related to polarization. So think of it again as subjective and objective as two circles that can overlap. And if they're exactly overlapping with each other so that there's no difference, they're exactly on top of each other, there's no polarization, right? And then the more that you separate them out, the more polarization you have, okay? And so think of it as when you are when you're immature, the more immature you are, the more polarization there is. And so maturity is something like bringing these things closer together to where there is more nuance. And this bringing of them closer together is more of a respecting of the respecting of the other. So it's like the more the subjective and objective come together, the more they respect each other, because the more they're looking at each other as one. Right. And then, of course, the ultimate overlap would be them being perfectly on top of each other, which they actually see each other perfectly as one. But then you've entered something like a paradox. And so I think that as you mature, there's something like, as men and women, we have our default orientation, which we're more likely to be oriented around. And then as you mature, a man should be more like coming into relationship with his feelings and emotions and like the importance of it. And a woman should be coming more in relation to like this objective way of viewing things. And I think that this is one of the powers of marriage. Like, as a married person, I am definitely constantly being challenged on how I think and how in my relation to emotions and my prioritization of them and like being with my wife has definitely called me to be in better relationship with this element of myself by maintaining a good relationship with her. And so I think that as a maturing person, both men and women should be reducing the polarization or the way in which they function more out of one mode of being versus the other, and they start coming closer together. And then I think that the ultimate like maturation, like the ultimate, like to be ultimate adulthood, is when these two things coincide with each other and sit on top of each other. And that's when you enter into paradox. That's when you collapse a binary. And this is what I've been trying to argue in my previous episodes on masculinity and ethics and all that stuff, like the episodes I did with Ryan, is that if you understand my arguments, you understand that the objective truth of ethics that I'm claiming is actually when the feminine and the masculine overlap, like completely. Once you reach this paradoxical state in which you're trying to both optimize or maximize individual freedom and group identity simultaneously. Because then you can see how you have something like the subjective is the individual identity, and then the objective is the group identity. So you have this coinciding of subjectivity and objectivity. And I think that this is when you have the ultimate state of adulthood. And I say this because I don't know how much in our culture right now there is an emphasis on the degree to which women and girls should be trying to come more, like meet men more in that realm. Like everything I see always mentions how men need to meet women more in their realm. I definitely feel like there's an asymmetry in our culture right now and what they call on men and women to do. It shouldn't be the case that men should just have to constantly focus on a woman's feelings and emotions. It should be the case that a woman should also be willing to examine her feelings and emotions and let them go enough to create a shared space of subjectivity and objectivity. They shouldn't be dominating each other like that. And so, if anybody is interested, please go back and listen to my episode, Revelation of Miracles. And go back and listen to my episodes on femininity and masculinity, but definitely the Revelation of Miracles and the poem at the end, because the poem is what I'm trying to articulate in here, in this idea of ultimate adulthood and the ending result of really seeing the self as the other, objectivity and subjectivity, seeing themselves as one. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to share it with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to support, and peace.